So, in our quest to provide a better list view to our users in this application, what we want to do is to add a custom list item like you see here. So we'll allow, as you add a task, it'll have the title displayed here, but also next to that on the right hand side will be a checkbox which will let you keep track of which tasks you've already completed. We're not actually going to see that list item during this step, but another feature of this list is that we'll be able to say whether or not we'll be able to show a view that will come up when there's no items in the list, which is a little more interesting than just a blank screen. So what we're going to do is get to the point where we have this list view on the screen, and since there will be no lists or no tasks already in the list, actually I think there may already be two, but we can clear those out at some point, I think, and then show this node data view. The node data view is just a view that you can have Android use whenever there is nothing in the adapter, as you'll see. So the steps that we'll be going through for this first piece of this class is just to replace the text view that we already have in this initial view of the app with a list view, and we'll also add this node data view. So I'm going to switch over to Eclipse and we'll get started. So in Eclipse, I already have the exact same project that we worked on last week, and what we'll just do is start with that and just build on from there. And the code is distributed, as you've already seen in. So you can start from any week and you can see the progress from the last week, sort of building on each other. And if you want to follow along, you may do so by starting with the code that you had from last week, and you can refer to the code that we just put up, I think, last night, if you want to see where we're going. So to get this started, as a quick reminder, what I have displayed here in this initial view of the app is all laid out and defined by the layout in the resources or res layouts main.xml file. So I'm going to open that up and look at what we already have in there. It is a relative layout, which, if you'll remember from last week, is a layout that allows us to lay out the children of the layout relative to each other and to this parent container, the relative layout, instead of just in a line like the. Now look at this. Here's kind of an artifact of when that was a linear layout. So that's a good point. I don't have to worry about this orientation tag as I do in a linear layout, which just allows me to lay things out either vertically or horizontally. In a relative layout, I have much more control over where things are laid out relative to each other. And you can see at the top there's this text view, which is the title, tasks, and then there is a text view underneath that, which is the sort of bulleted list of all the tasks that we have so far. And then underneath that is a button that we use to go to the Add Task screen right here. So the first step is to replace this text view with a more interesting component, a new component called List View. And we want the ID to be a special ID that the Android list activity that we're going to be introducing in the next step is to display that. And that ID is like this. Android, back up here. Okay, so what do I mean by sort of a magic ID? This, instead of what you're used to seeing for IDs, like here, this is the initial declaration of the ID for this text view. You'll notice that it's kind of like in sort of, if you think of it as like a folder metaphor, like this is all the IDs, and underneath that we want the task title ID. In this case, we have this Android colon in front of the list, and that means that it's an ID that's defined at the top level of the SDK in a list of things that Android usually looks for. And what we can say is, since I'm telling you now you know that the list activity looks for any list views that are created created with this ID. That way we don't have to worry about wiring up which list view we're going to be using to control via the activity. So this is sort of automatically looked for by convention by the list activity, and that is sort of a trick that you can use to not have to wire things up so much. We're going to keep the width at fill parent. We're going to keep the height at wrap content. The list view will be laid out below the text view that's right here for the title and above the add button. But what we're going to do for that, remember I talked about the no data view. So what the list activity will allow us to do is when there is no data to be displayed in the list, we can specify another some other component, whatever type of component that we want, to be used when there's no data in that list. And all we have to do is, here I'm going to paste in some code. All we have to do to make that happen almost magically is to use another sort of magic ID, which is this Android empty text view. Or I'm sorry, Android Android:empty ID. And this is looked for automatically by the list activity, just as the list view is looked for automatically by the Android list identifier. And this will automatically be managed to be invisible or visible based on whether there's any data inside the list adapter. So that's pretty useful. Let's see some other things. So the text, let's have the string no tasks be displayed in the center of the screen when, if we go back and look here at the slides, that's exactly what we want to see. Right in the center of the screen we want to see no tasks when there are no tasks to be seen. So I'm going to show you now this little refactoring technique that you can do. Instead of going into the strings file and adding this no tasks key, you can just type in here no tasks, which is what we want to see, and then select that, and then go up here to where is the refactor? There's the refactor menu. Go to refactor, and you can see that this is a much abbreviated list since we're this XML document. You'd have a lot more options if you're in Java, but the only one that they have right now available for editing Android layouts is to extract an Android string. So I can select that no task string and say extract that, and I'll get this menu here. I want the string to be no tasks, and I want the r.string to be no tasks. I'll just delete this underscore at the end. And then the resource file, in case you've broken your strings out into different files. We only have one file here, but you can still choose which one you'd want. And once I click OK, then that string will be replaced here in my XML file with this no tasks text that identifies that string in the strings file. And just to see that nothing too crazy is going on there, I'm going to open the resource strings.xml, and you can see that that was added to the list of resources in the strings XML right here at the top. So that'll save you a little bit of typing. And that was just added, I believe, in 1.5. I may be, or around the time 1.5 was released, that the IDE was updated to do that, and that's a big time saver, especially when you've got a lot of strings in your application. Okay, so once again, we wanted that to be laid out right in the center of the screen, and the way you do that is with another attribute that we're just running into for the first time, and that is the gravity attribute of the component. And that takes a pipe delimited list of different keys, and the keys that we want in this case are center vertical and center horizontal, split by a pipe character, or the straight up and down line on your keyboard. And you'll notice also something that's a little bit maybe interesting, and this is a feature of the relative layout that we're using here. The text view that we're using for the no data view has the exact same layout set up as the list view. So the layout width is fill parent, layout height is wrap content, and it's laid out below the task's title and above the add button. So if you think through that, you'd probably expect that the text view is going to be laid out directly over the list view, but that's actually not the case because the list activity is going to manage that for us. So again, that makes sure that whichever one is fits the situation, whether or not there's items in the list or not, is the one that's going to be displayed.
So Tony, while we're on the list or on this view, I had a couple of questions about the magic IDs. One was why they do not need the plus sign.
Because they are already defined. So in this case up here, there's no such thing as a task's title that Android knows about. We have to sort of initialize it right off the bat with the plus identifier. And this Android ID is already defined, this Android list ID. There's a whole set of IDs that are sort of in this kind of a namespace for IDs, with the Android being the namespace identifier. And that's already defined by Android. So anytime you see an application using a list that one of the applications that ships with Android, they're probably identifying it with this same identifier. And there was actually a question about, I think, something along these lines in the forums too. So someone asked, I think, can I reuse the identifier from one view to another? And the answer is yes, you can. The only thing that you need to make sure of is that you don't use it twice in a view that's going to be loaded by one activity, because the activity is looking for that identifier in the views that it loads. So that's how these IDs can be reused.
Okay. And then a question about the empty is, what are the rules around the empty? Does it only work with lists? Does it work with other things?
I don't know if it works with other things. I do know that it works with lists, and that's the only time that I've run into needing it. I can't really think of another component that has sort of a two-state situation like that. Like, I mean, there's a lot of very simple components like buttons and checkboxes and things like that, and then you have like the map components, which are pretty complex. And the list component is really the only one that I can think of that where it has a situation where it may have no data. Maybe I'm just blanking on that, but I don't know. That's an interesting question. Maybe there's other places that this empty ID can be used. I don't know of any though.
Okay.
Let's give this a run and see what happens. Look, my project contains errors. Okay, good. Let's go look down into the errors console. So I'm moving down here to the way I've got my IDE set up. I have this minimized down at the bottom, but there is a problems view that it's called in Eclipse, and it shows me that I have r.id.tasklist_text cannot be resolved inside the viewTaskActivity.java, and that's because we just got rid of it. So that answers the question of whether or not we can run the app at this point. So the problem is that in the viewTaskActivity, which is the activity that controls this view, we no longer have this text area here, right here. So we have to go tell the viewTaskActivity that will no longer be something to look for. I'm just going to get rid of this. I don't think we really need that anymore. Show tasks is now going to have to work a little bit differently. So I'll just clean this activity up enough so that we can get it running. So onCreate will be the first method called. SetContentView is still going to work the same way. Then we'll call SetUpViews, and in SetUpViews I will get a reference to the add button. I no longer need to get a reference to that task text. So when show tasks happen on resume, that's not going to be there anymore as a component that we can, or a variable that we can reference, because we just got rid of it. Let's just cut all of this out because we're going to load tasks in a different way. And now this at least should compile, and the tasks that we get out of the Task Manager application are We're going to deal with those in just a little bit. So now, since everything compiles, let's give it a look and see what we can see so far. Okay, there we go. And the no data view displays because, well, here's why the no data view displays, even though we haven't done anything with an activity, with the list activity yet, because the way we have things set up here in the relative layout and the way views work is when you define them in XML, further down the file than other ones, they sit on top of the ones that are previous to them in a relative layout type of situation. So this button is sort of in a Z position above every component that is defined before it. And this text view, which we use for the no data view, is sitting above the list view in a Z index, and it takes up the same size. So that's why it shows up in the middle of the screen right now. And that is at least enough to show us how the no data view will look without having to worry about any data coming out of a list activity through an adapter. But it shows us at least that we've got the layout matching what we wanted to build for this step. So I think that's a good step. Is there any questions on what we've done so far?
We do have a few questions. A couple of people asked, what happens if you have two lists?
You don't have to use this magic ID thing. That just makes it easy so you don't have to wire things up. I don't know if that's actually a good idea, though. I guess it may be possible. I guess I can't think of any reason why it would be a bad idea, but you may run into some interesting things that you have to do to get those things working. For instance, I don't think you could. Well, I know you couldn't use this sort of magic ID approach to wiring up a list activity to control that one list on the screen. You'd have to control them each some other way. Like, you'd at least have to get access to. Like whenever certain events happened, like tapping on an item in a list, you'd have to have a list, or you'd have to have a listener that knew which one got tapped, and so you knew which collection of data to look up the data that was interesting about that tap in it. But I guess there's no reason that you wouldn't be able to do that, but you wouldn't be able to use this magic ID type thing.
Okay, and are the list view and text view connected to one another? Does the system know that they're somehow connected, or is it just that the list sits over top of the text view?
Yeah, they're not specially connected. It's just that the list activity knows to look for a view called Android:empty, or with an ID of Android:empty, and display that one and hide the list whenever you run into the situation where there's no data in the list. So I guess they're connected at the controller by their IDs, because we've used these conventional IDs that the list controller or the list activity knows to look for.
Somebody wanted to see that trick again with automatically adding a string to the resource file.
For adding strings, let's say we have this string ID tasks. I'm opening up the strings resource file. If I get rid of tasks, now there's no tasks in there. Should be an error on this screen back in the main XML. And if I type in tasks as a string that I want, select it, go to refactor, Android, extract Android string, and then I get a little dialog here which lets me choose the identifier in the resource file and the text that I want in there. And then I can choose which resource file in case I've split things out into different files, and then hit OK. And now this will be replaced with the identifier, and the strings file will be edited, and now strings is at the top. Tasks. I'm sorry, tasks is at the top of the strings file. And everything is now green. Okay, any other questions about this set of steps?
So there are just a few more. One is a comment. Someone is asking, layout below and above refers to the Z order in Android? No, I'm assuming not.
Oh, I didn't hear what you said. I thought you said V order. You said Z order.
Yes.
No, not quite. It refers to the horizontal order. sorry, blanked a little bit there. Yeah, it refers to the horizontal order. The Z order is controlled by the positioning in the file, or like the definition in the file. So this one is going to be below. This text view is going to be below the list view in Z space. Does everybody understand what I mean by Z space? Z, X, Y, those coordinates on the screen.
It's the vertical stacking. What appears closest to the viewer.
Yeah, I wouldn't use vertical though. Yeah, it's which is from the viewer's perspective is in front or behind other components, and then so I mean, as evidenced by the fact that there's nothing special happening here to make this no tasks view show up in front of the list view. It just it is because I mean, there's nothing special in the activity making that happen. It's just showing up because the Z order is higher because it was defined lower in this file. So it's going to show up in front of the list view.
Okay, so two more quick questions. Regarding the special ID with the Android prefix, can I use it for positioning also?
Could you position against it, like layout below the Android list? Yes, you could.
Okay, specifically, what does not have to be wired up if you use Magic ID?
By the way, Magic ID is not a technical term. Hopefully, I haven't. I mean that it sort of acts magical because it's a conventional ID. What doesn't have to be wired up is I think that will be better explained during the next step. But in a nutshell, it's that this list activity, which we're going to turn this view task activity into. I don't need to tell it where to find what component to use as its list. It's going to look for this ID.
Okay, and then finally, if you want to add, what happens if you want to add two different scrolling lists on the same screen? So I think somebody's worried about using the Magic ID and then having two different scrolling lists, and that's the final question that I have.
You wouldn't be able to use those IDs the same way, or you could use one and then the next list would be you have to control that in a different way than what we're going to see in the next few steps.
Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, sure. That's what I'm here for.